we had the number one murder rate in the United States that year, and people were dying. One of the people I met down in the French Quarter, who was coming to see me, they shot him in the head on the way there.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, their life meant nothing there. Like it was just a game. I got another one. Another person walking down the road. So, how do you, who look totally different, how do you even attempt to blend into that?
All right.
Nice.
That would have been great to have in the whole cup thing.
Oh, don't worry, it'll come back up.
Something a lot of animosity. All right, episode 7, and I really should probably stop naming them, the number on here, because if I have to drop one because of technical difficulties, it'll be very strange.
I like how technical difficulties just becomes a blanket term. Anything that goes wrong.
Yeah, and really, if a person's going back and counting the episodes and they find one missing, that's a weirdo right there.
Yeah, but right now,
you don't have to worry about that.
Well, we have a couple of weirdos watching right now.
What?
And they're gonna attack me because they're not gonna attack me. Don't attack me, guys. But I accidentally, when I uploaded episode 3, I accidentally uploaded the thumbnail as episode 2. And they were like,
welcome to the World Wide Web.
What is 2? What is 3? Where are we?
No.
What is this world?
I can't. It's too much, right? Yeah.
All right, but episode 7, Cedrus Kepha.
Here I am.
Nice.
Tell me about Quercus Marylandica.
Well, oaks are typically, just there's so much to say about them. You get all the confusion, right? Of white oak versus red oak.
Yeah,
you hear that all the time, right?
I don't know how people could get them confused. I really don't.
Well, okay, so it is confusing because there is an actual white oak, Quercus alba, right? And then there is an actual red oak. But the problem is that they're all classified into those two categories. So every oak, whether it's Quercus virginiana, they all have this label of either I'm red or I'm white. And,
the world's not so red and white.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. Based on my question.
I guess I opened this can of worms. I just wanted to, because I remember that it was funny. It was a meme.
Yeah.
And I sent it to you. And you were like, "Oh, I have that book." The book was this guy.
Oh, Understanding Wood.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
It wasn't Understanding Wood.
Okay.
So there's this guy. He has a piece of wood, and he has like a monocle telescope, and it says "Identifying Wood."
Oh yeah.
And then under the wood, someone wrote, "Yep, it's wood." I thought that was the funniest thing. And then you're like, "Oh my god! Of course, I'm going to be interested in all of that." But when did you? Why do you like wood? What is so great about wood? What do you love about wood? And I know we're keeping a very captive audience. All these people here,
they came to learn about wood, right? Okay, well, that's great because that's something that comes naturally to me. I think it is because there's so many misconceptions about it. In the world of carpentry. Plus, you just look at wood; it's cool to look at. But then as you get into it and you start working with it, you start hearing these sayings that people say, the wood's got to do this, wood's got to, and you find out like most all of it's wrong. Like the general consensus of people's understanding of wood is just wrong.
Really?
Like I've never studied a subject where there's just like a more uneducated fan base than wood. Wow. So it kind of caused me to study more. The more I study, the more I like it. And I like trees in general, so it's like I get back to that, and I don't really know why I like trees. I just do.
I was about to ask you. Well, let's get into your psych.
Yeah,
let's get into your your psychopathy.
Yeah,
your psychology.
I can't name like that day
that is cool.
That it just kind of. Hey, you know what? I'm all right with trees. But I grew up in a place that had lots of trees, and
but you're not
my backyard had tree. I was a tree climber. Yeah, not a hugger. Unless I'm trying to calculate the board feet, right? Then I will hug. Yeah.
So because some people would say, how can you really like trees if you cut them down?
Oh,
You use them.
yeah. Guess what? If everything's got to be used. If nobody cuts the trees down, they're going to burn. They're just,
Right.
it's just part of the whole ecological system. They have an important role in providing us oxygen, that kind of stuff. But if you're responsible, that's why I tell people to measure before they cut.
Right.
Quit wasting the trees. We're cutting down enough.
I'm curious. What do you think? How important do you think it is? This is a large question.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is, and why do you think it is important? I probably should just ask the first one. How important do you think it is to work with your hands? And why is it important to work with your hands? And not just like you personally, I mean like for a person.
Yeah, I mean, this to me is actually it's a serious and passionate thing, and it's something that a person who works with their hands, they see it in people who don't work with their hands.
Really?
Yeah, it's like,
and not just their hands, being like sissy hands.
Yeah. It's like you're missing that physical experience, and there's life lessons that can be transcribed through the work that you do, and if a person is disconnected from that, they're like somewhat disconnected from reality.
Really?
Yeah, that's my theory.
That's an interesting point of view. That's an interesting theory. What do you think that is? What do you think it is about it, right? Because like I understand, but like nobody goes like, go. I'm just like boom, boom. It's been like this hammer is life, and I'm the nail, and I'm being driven towards my goal in this wood. Like nobody really picks up on this kind of thing.
Exactly. And I can kind of, I think the first time I realized the concept, I was living in New Orleans, and this was when computers first started showing up in people's houses. So yeah, I'm that old, where everybody didn't have that kind of World Wide Web access back then. And there was this individual on the computer talking to somebody in New York or somewhere else. And she was like all real excited about it. Like, look, I'm talking to this person. He's like over there. And we don't even know each other. And it dawned on me, like, you could go outside and do the same thing. Like, there's real people out there from other places that you could converse with, right? But the whole internet thing became so much more, I don't know the right word for it. It became just like a normal part of everybody's life, to where, that became the norm. People are known by their profiles and not their person. It's a disconnect from reality. And working with your hands is similar to that, to where when you work with something that's real, whether, woodworking is my thing, but a mechanic, a whatever, a farmer, you're working with something that's actually real. You're not farming on a computer program. Like, people that you meet are real people. And they're not, like on a construction site, that person's not trying to get likes. That person's just straight, blunt, and honest. Wow. And that's a, it's a different aspect that I think is, people who don't work with their hands kind of lack that.
Right. Kind of toughens you up, I suppose.
Yeah.
Working with those characters that one might deal with. It's interesting because we always find our way back here talking about technology
and like almost
the internet.
That's me and Isaiah had a whole conversation about this after the last episode we recorded.
Yes.
About how really the goal of this is to bring everything into technology, and how to, like, what were we saying?
Everything in our little community
revolves around technology, and
how important. So the issue is that somehow we always end up turning. It's like we're here, we're bashing technology, and then we're like, hey. But go ahead and like and follow and subscribe.
and congratulations, because, I am the one person that you cannot bring into technology. I just refused, Yeah,
well, guess what? You're not the one person. There's other people who have said that. As somebody, a great, I'll call him out. Nate was talking. I was trying to. It's funny because everyone's like, I was trying to explain, like, when I was explaining the audio situation to you with the other podcast. Which one was it? Yeah, with the
Shepherds.
with the Shepherds podcast, we're having some more of those technical difficulties, and this time it was very technical, and there were difficulties, and I was explaining the problem to him, and then and Sheffer was there, and he like had to turn and explain it to Nate in sheetrock, and he's like, "That's like someone giving you," and I was going like, "It seems pretty." I was saying, "It's pretty obvious to me." Like I had a thing, and it wasn't what it was supposed to be, and I'm trying to figure out what the issue was, and that's obvious to me. But he like was explaining them. And so what Nate just said to me before, because like I was trying to talk about computers, it goes like, whenever it starts like talking about computers, my brain just shuts off. Like I will not allow it. It will not allow it to learn anything about computers.
Yeah. I remember a couple months ago, somebody was trying to show me how to copy and paste. And I was like, kind of did it a couple times. I'm like, cool, it's easy now. And I went back and I saw that I did it wrong. And I was like, nope.
Gave up on computers as a whole.
That computer's stupid. But I just I'm not really interested in it. I suppose if I had an interest in it, I could learn.
And I suppose that's with everything, but I guess it is true. Younger people were much more intuitive with it.
Yeah.
And even yet, like the guys now, the kids when they're like 3 or 4 now, they figure it out super quick.
Yes.
It's just much more intuitive for us. And maybe just because our brains are more plasticized.
There's not as much lead in the ceramic dishes and arsenic.
That being said,
right?
some kids don't. That being said, some kids don't know how to read tape measure.
True.
Right? It's funny.
Yes.
It's funny. Great friend of ours, David Weston.
Yes.
And another great friend of ours who I'm not going to call because he was made to be the butt of the story. Is this? He's a kid. We grew up with him.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of taught himself how to read. He wasn't really great at it. It was horrible. Like studying, he didn't learn how to read very well. He didn't pay attention in school. Didn't learn how to read very well. But one day he was messing with David Weston about Joe might not think it's as funny as I do, but he was messing with David Weston and he was like harassed. He was saying something to him, joking around with him about tape measures and him and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna teach a class how to read tape measures or whatever." And David goes, "Well, to read tape measures, you gotta know how to read."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
That sounds like David. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's true that there are just
David Weston on the show.
We do need to. It is true that I don't think he knows about the show. It is true that people these days, like there's also other things that we're missing. But at the same time, we go, well, why would I need to learn how to read a tape measure when I can just go on in the internet and buy a house? Which you kind of can do it at this point.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there is an app for everything. And I run into that a lot, in training some of the younger generations of carpenters, So I realize they can't add in their head, everybody's got to type everything into a phone in order, like 10 times 12. Hold on.
Right.
No, stop.
That is an issue. That is an issue. And I think it is because, the way we are, as humans, we're super, super complex.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many aspects. There's just so much we don't fully understand and we fully, we fully comprehend. I was thinking about it this week this morning, actually, because I was watching podcasts and I was watching I was listening to podcasts while I was trying to get a workout in. And I was listening to Dr. Andrew Huberman. Nate turned you on to him. And I was listening to one. He was talking to interviewing another doctor about the gut microbiome. But I thought it was very interesting. They were talking about all this different stuff, and one of the things they were talking about, and there was a mention in there about there's actually, which a lot of people don't know, there's neurons in the gut. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking like, this is crazy too. Yeah. I was like, okay. What are they doing? But then at the same time, they were talking about like fasting and all these other things. And the doctor was going, like, he was asking about fasting, and the doctor was going, well, I can't say that. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm saying the science we don't know, and I can't say that it's great and it's positive. But I'm not saying that it's bad or whatever. But so we need to wait on science. But I was thinking it's like funny. Because it was like 50 years ago, like we just thought, oh, well, you just like eat food and now we're talking about neurons inside the stomach.
Yeah.
And so it's like there's so much we don't know.
Yes.
And so much, we're so complex we don't even understand. So we just thought like 50 years ago, it's just like, because what he was talking about was that your stomach is craving fatty acids.
Right.
And you will interpret it as your brain. Some people will interpret it as a craving.
It's not just nerve neurons, it's cognitive neurons.
But your brain will interpret as a craving for sugar. And a lot of times they're saying like a lot of people have sugar cravings. It's actually their body's craving fatty acids, but it's interpreted in their brain as that way. But it's just so funny because 50 years ago, and that's, I guess I'm kidding around too. 50 years ago, it was like, or 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was just like, oh, well, you're hungry is just your brain, your stomach telling you want food. You just when you want sugar. And it's not actually that there's actually neurons in your stomach that's communicating. So we're super, super complex.
Yeah.
And there's so many different aspects we don't even, it's like, asbestos was perfectly okay a couple 20, 30 years ago. And so it's like when you have kids in school, right? And some of the stuff we learn in school is not super applicable to life. But you have kids in school and they're like, why would I need to learn this? And that's what the question would be like, why do I need to learn math when I can just go on my phone and do it on my phone and then boom, I got the answer. But because it's not just about the knowing how to add 2 + 2. It's about what it does for your brain, specifically at a young age, how it trains your brain, how it orders your brain to think about things. The same thing with reading. Orders your brain on how to compartmentalize information, how to put things together, how to do certain kinds of thinking. Similar to what you're talking about when you're talking about working with your hands. It works, there's things like hand-eye coordination. All these different things. If you get in there and you understand, it's like, they can take athletes over here, like who are super athletes, and throw them in this other thing. They're pretty solid at it because they have this solid hand-eye coordination from this athlete. And it's like, it's a separate thing. It's like they're talking about, okay, it's like, this guy over here might, be a boxer, but he could learn how to kick really well because he knows how to use his hands, how to use his body. He's got that coordination. It's the same thing with working with your hands. And it's also the way you think about problems, because this is another form of problem solving, right?
Mm-hmm.
You come and then you go, okay, how do we build this thing? How do we solve this problem?
Right.
And it's another way, but it orders your mind in a way of doing problem solving that you can apply to life.
And there's also a very it's easy to tell when somebody, like all of us grew up in a sort of a country environment where you're always doing things, you're either on the farm or you're doing something with your hands. So it's easy when somebody who has never done any of that it's easy to see when someone who comes from the city, never done any of that, and they come and they try to do any little thing, they're just so uncoordinated.
Yes. So like I was that guy at one point, So I grew up in Southern California. It's like all I knew how to do was to like go to the beach, hang out, get in trouble, that type of stuff. And one of the first places I moved was in a rural place in Louisiana, and I thought everybody was so dumb, but it didn't have anything to do with intelligence. It was just like the way that they talked. It's like everybody had this like weird way of talking. I'm like, oh, they're going to all think I'm smart because I know how to talk proper English, But I realized real quickly, they all knew how to fix stuff and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like if something broke, it was just broke to me. Like, I don't know. Like if the car's not working, what's wrong with it? Not working. So I realized that, the way that we perceive intelligence is I would say most of the time, it's totally false,
It's very subjective.
Yeah. So we look at a person who might talk a certain way and we think, well, that person's ignorant. No, it's just, that they didn't have the emphasis that we had on English, and that person's probably capable of doing a whole lot of things that I can't do, and podcasts, things like this they're great because you can see perspectives through a lot of different eyes, and I like that. I like that aspect of it, because if you're listening, you can learn from anybody.
Right. So we were talking about with Sheffer about being involved with music. You learn that everybody has something to offer, because you can be 2 people in a room and one of them is technically much more sound than the other, but they can still play and write a song together and write different things. So everybody has something to offer, and it's interesting because I think there's better words. I use interesting way too much. Like, every time I say interesting now, I'm self-conscious. In one way, I felt great because I came across the thing where we were talking about saying something like that whenever something to you sets your mind up to think about it, and instead of just thinking about your reply, but actually consider it. But that being said, every time a guest says something, I feel like I say, "Well, that's interesting," but it is. It's like Spock. Instead of saying fascinating, I say interesting.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think there's a lot of different words. I think there's different words we just that other people probably have figured them out, and we haven't figured them out for all these different kind of things, because you have different forms, different kinds of intelligence. And so you have people who are not like in some way the version. I know there's 2 different versions of intelligence, and one of them is more towards wisdom, and one of them is more towards the common thought version of intelligence, which is speed and the ability to kind of think on your feet and adapt to situations. But that's even more nuanced, because there's some people who aren't very fast but talk with a lot of information, and they're considered intelligent. So and then there's people who don't have I don't know nothing or know how,
Yeah.
But they're very intelligent people when it comes to just complex conversations.
Right. And you know what you brought up earlier about like the gut and the neurons and all that, it's interesting because before that knowledge comes out, you might have a person that, no, your gut talk to you. That's what my mama told me. And they look at, well, that's ignorant.
You're crazy.
Oh, well, it's actually now it's proven, and one of the most,
or gut feeling.
yeah, gut
like
feeling,
They would say,
or
"Oh,
know it
well,
by
who's
heart,
talking to me?"
all these different things that years ago we just thought, no, those things don't actually think, it's just an old saying.
Right.
And then it turned out to, okay, well, there actually is merit behind it, and I think one of the greatest examples of that to me was the existence of a rogue wave. So here you had sailors hundreds of years talking about these things, saying that they exist. The scientific community would not believe them. They said it is like impossible. It's mathematically impossible for a rogue wave to exist.
Find a rogue wave for somebody.
So a rogue wave is typically, a wave that comes from a different direction, but it's also one of like much larger size. So like a 70-foot wave or something like that.
You're talking about around like earthquakes, right?
Yeah, no,
Or just in general.
no.
So I haven't
just in
really studied
general.
roadways. I just
Yeah.
noticed
This is
it
out
in
in
the
the middle of the ocean or on the
Here's
beach?
in the middle of the
Middle of the
ocean, but it's
Winds
an
blowing all the
interesting
waves
thing.
in
It
one
wasn't
direction.
until like the 1990s that they actually recorded one hitting an oil rig platform up in I think it was up by Norway. But it wasn't until then that the scientific community had to come up and like, oh shoot, they do exist.
Wow.
Sailors been telling them for years, but now we have actual proof, and I understand,
Like
science.
there's a lot with sailors, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
think about
yeah,
like think about
exactly, right?
octopus and giant squid.
Yeah,
They-
sure. The edge of the earth, all,
like,
all
oh.
of it, but
Well, the edge of the earth isn't real.
right, of course.
You just-
Oh,
something else.
we
I
just
gotta
mentioned.
realize.
See, we just played.
So,
Yeah. One of these things is
Yes,
not like the
yeah.
other.
Here
Two
we
truths
are
and a
in the
lie.
age of technology, and there's people talking about whether or not the earth is flat.
Right.
Yeah,
That's how far we've come along.
that's very interesting. But
Yeah.
have you ever been in space?
No.
No, but that's interesting because they. See, I did it again. You gotta down. I was gonna suggest he almost give him permission to hit me there every time I say interesting, but that would be a mistake. I don't want to get hit every time I say
Violence.
interesting. But with like things like this giant squid and all these different things where they're like oh, that's just old wives' tales or whatever. That's just sailors talk. They say all kinds of craziness.
Right.
I mean, think about manatees. Like they described them in very interesting ways. Like these mermaid like creatures and all these different ways they describe these things. And then we find carcasses, not of the manatees, specifically the squid, up on the beach, and they go, oh well, maybe this is real. Now we have footage of them and all these and crazy footage.
We know apparently less about the ocean and the things that are in the ocean than we do about the moon or something. It's like it's really, really incredible.
Which is really interesting. But what's really, really crazy about it is that then, and people talk about this whole COVID thing has kind of shown that, science doesn't know everything, which is very interesting, very crazy because, sometimes certain people will be like, oh, you just need to trust the scientists. And are you a scientist? And oh yeah. But at the same time, here's all the examples of times that they told us something wasn't real and wasn't, I'm not saying to go and question all your scientists, but it's like, the people will have ideas about something. It's like for a lot, very early people were saying stuff like, the masks don't help much, or, people just say, it's only doing this to certain people, and they were denying that was true. And now that after everything's over and the information is kind of out there and everything's kind of, we can look backwards, we go, okay, well, it is kind of true. It is realistically. But it's like when people will say something and they'll be like, well, are you a doctor?
Yes.
And go, well, my doctor told me this. How many times have a doctor's given somebody, this many years to live, and then they live twice that long?
And what
kinda guessing.
what takes place is when an actual doctor says something that's
True.
not different than what everybody else is saying, and then it's, well, you're a rogue doctor.
Just like one of the
You don't
rogue waves.
exist. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I guess, it's super hard to understand because what you can trust these days, because you don't want to find your own bias.
That's one of you look at one of the major problems in society as a whole is the polarization. People don't give each other any kind of respect or even acknowledge that you could have a point.
Mhm.
You know, if we're on opposing sides,
Right.
you're automatically wrong and I'm right. And the whole purpose of the conversation is for me to say something catchy that'll make it sound like I'm
Right.
real
Right, right.
smart. You know?
Yeah.
And that's
Trip you up.
it's a ridiculous way to communicate. But you know, when you see that, you know, type of thing in the news all the time, you know, I can't watch that.
Right.
The debating. Because to me they're not, nobody's really trying to find an answer. It's just they're trying to talk over each
Right.
other. And that's another thing about working with your hands is the problem solving skills.
Right.
You know, you're constantly engaged in what you're working with, as opposed to, yeah, I can find the answer by looking it up, but then I forget it right away, you know,
Right.
because I didn't figure it out. I didn't put that mental contact into it.
That's what it occurs when you take shortcuts. You know, it's somewhere like, you know, if you work for something and pay for yourself versus if somebody buys it for you. You know, it's kind of a lesson that it comes up very quickly with children, where it's like, I was thinking about this myself because I was thinking, man, like I don't want to, because other people have, and it's kind of like some other thing we've talked about, where it's like other, children, there's the massive important quality about raising people up in struggle. But I was thinking, like, I don't want to be poor all my life and like have a bunch of children that are like have my children. So it's like there is a way, there has to be a way. So people have struggled with. There is a way to teach those kind of lessons without just being like, well, I just have to not take any opportunities to make money so that my children will be strong people.
Yeah.
And I think this part of it is like the importance of teaching, working for something at a very early age.
Yeah.
And because when you buy stuff for your children, they're just gonna treat it like I did. So when my parents bought me something, well, then this just came from nowhere. My parents, like, where does money come from? It's just there. Children have no. It's those famous those commercials where they ask children how much things cost, and they have no idea how much things cost. And they're like, $1 million. It's like, no, that's just a phone. It's like $100. But teaching all that, because when you teach someone and make someone put an effort for something and say, okay, instead of just buying you this, you're going to go and you're going to find a job. You're going to cut grass around the neighborhood or whatever it is. There's much more value they have and much more care and concern they'll put into their possessions, because they equate the amount of effort. It didn't just drop out of the sky. Because that's the thing. If something drops out of the sky, so it's like, I don't know, it's like if you go to work and you put in this work and you make money, that money, like when you get that, you go, okay, now like I need to figure out what I'm going to use this, use it wisely. Yeah. But when someone, like if you ever have one of those things where money falls in your lap, it doesn't have to be a crazy amount. Yeah. It could be a small amount. And you go, this is bonus, because you had your mindset on what you're going to get. We're going to deal with this week, and then you go, I got $50. I can do anything with this. I can waste this on anything, right? Because it just came because it's no effort put in there to acquire it.
I do think that's a big part of it. Also, just financial responsibility is just something that sadly enough, it's not really taught in too many families, and that's why poor families tend to bring forth poor children that bring, I remember it was strange because I had no desire to have money, even when I was in high school. It's like it just wasn't interesting to me. I didn't care. I started practicing being homeless when I was like 12 and 13 years old, so that I knew, like, as soon as I get done with all this stuff, I can be homeless somewhere, and then things are just going to be better.
Wow.
I did that for several years, but
I'd like to hear that story. Yeah. Why did you want to be homeless?
I don't know. It's
thought it
like
was
something
cool.
like the freedom of not being
in a home
connected to everything. It's like all my life I've heard everybody else just like, oh, I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to get this job. It just nothing about that interested me, So I did actually go to college for one semester. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So how did that work out for you, that whole homelessness?
I tell you what, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, but again, the hands-on experience, right? I
wouldn't recommend it, but here's why it was great for me. And you should do it too. We'll call that. Kepha Hawkins tells you details his life.
Talk
being
to your
homeless.
doctor. So what I did learn is just some nasty secrets about society, and how we really deal with the unwanted people. And most of the people out there that are on the streets are, they're mentally ill. They're not. There are a lot of just straight hustlers that when you're driving and you see the person with the sign, that's most likely a hustle. The person who's walking around the street talking to themselves, yelling at things that aren't there, that individual can't just go get a job. Like a lot of people, well, why don't they just get a job?
Right.
Hire him.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to hire him? Okay, that's why. That's
Right,
why he
exactly.
doesn't have a job, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous for that individual. It's dangerous for other people. Mental health is like a huge issue that we all just kind of sweep under the rug and let them walk around, and nobody, unless you have money, there's no help for those people.
Right. No, this is a massive issue, and it's something I always talk about every time some sort of school shooting or some sort of mass shooting occurs, because everyone's immediate conversation is guns, and nobody's talking about it. No sane person is killing 20, 30 people.
Yeah.
No sane person is. So that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest, most obvious thing.
Yeah.
There's clearly some sort of mental issue.
Right.
No one is going to sit here and go, no, I think that guy's pretty sane and pretty normal.
Yeah.
He just chose to be a murderer.
I would have done it too if I would have had a gun.
Nobody said, but nobody goes and sometimes it's there in the periphery, but it's kind of back to what you're talking about, the whole debate thing. And that's the entirety of the way the system is set up. Some people refer to it as a matrix or whatever. It's all set up. It's set up in a way it's like, okay, it's kind of similar to what we're talking about in college, where it's set up like, yeah, that's what people do. And if you go in college and this is the direction you're going to go in this direction, if you take this thing, you're going to be in this area over here.
Yes.
And it's like only until recently things kind of got shook up, specifically with the things about media, where it's like, for the longest time, it was controlled by these conglomerates and these corporations and all these things. And then YouTube pops up. And now there's these alternative forms. But now, because when it first popped up, they're like, oh, it's never going to work. These corporations are like, oh, dude, social media is ridiculous. No one's going to make it. Listen. But now, when you have people with hundreds of millions of subscribers, you have people who developing serious voices for free, because you can just, on YouTube, it's free. I don't know if anybody knows. You can just post stuff. They might take you down if they don't like what you have to say. You can't just post anything. But you can post things, and no one's like charge you to post it. You have a platform. And if people like what you got to say, you'll develop an audience. And then very quickly, not very over time, they were showing to push it down, but then now they're going, okay, shoot, because now their audience is dropping, and so now they started trying to acquire that. They started making their own accounts and trying to regain control over this whole other platform, these corporations, because they didn't back the right horse,
right,
as it were. But that's the whole setup. But back to the conversation on mental health. That's something I always say every time one of these shootings occur, because everyone jumps into what the system is, what it's always talking about. And I actually get kind of slightly annoyed, because I've had people, come at me with this, and it sounds as though I'm arguing in that realm. But what I'm trying to point out is both sides got kind of is wrong.
Yeah.
Is wrong. And what I'm trying to point out is okay, what you have to understand is if the first thing you start talking about is gun control, you're already caught up in the trap, because the entire point was to get you to talk about gun control instead of the real issue of what's going on here. Because we should be asking ourselves why the mental health system is set up the way, why this occurs. And it's not because the person found the tool, because there was something else there before all that.
And you have to understand, in dealing with a person like that, it takes a lot of work, so you have to have, it's not like a person with mental health, you just give them a few pills and they're a normal person the next day. It's not. It's like a lot of these things are continued, efforts with medication sometimes and therapy and things, and you have to keep a close eye on them. So it involves somebody else to be involved in it, and if there's no money there,
and trustworthy people,
and we don't value that as a priority in our society, right? We don't look at
charity.
Hey, look, we got wars to fight, we got roads to fix, we got whatever, blah 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 blah. We don't think of mental health as a priority until it's living next to you.
Right.
And then, hey, why don't we do something about this? Well, guess what? Somebody lives next to all those people. So, and those people, with the right care, concern, tweaking, a lot of them can be fixed.
Right.
Can function in society, but it takes a lot of effort, and nobody's really willing to put in the effort.
Well, out of sight, out of mind is what it always is.
Right. Unless
they're in sight.
Take my route and live on the streets with them.
Right.
And then you get to see that every day, all day, That's the only people
Right.
It's interesting, because you see not only how society takes advantage of people, but how they take advantage of each other and how they band together even in those types of environments, and we would help each other out. Um, it's just a unique perspective that if you go through it, you'll have,
Right.
and I would say for that reason, I'm glad I did it, but yeah, I'm not,
Not looking to do it again.
not in a rush to go do it at this point.
An interesting question, and this is a layered question. When you were out on the streets, living on the streets, was it pretty equal men and women, or was it mostly men?
Mostly men.
Mostly
Yeah.
men. That brings up an interesting topic on men's mental health in society, because
that's a huge topic.
it's a very huge topic, because a lot of
Crack
times,
our knuckles before we get into this.
Yeah.
a lot of times, not saying at all that women don't deal with their own extreme issues when it comes to mental health,
Mm-hmm.
but men's mental health, a lot of times, because there's a general training in society that men should not express emotion, except maybe anger and rage and frustration and things like that. That's seen as manly. But men shouldn't express feelings. Men shouldn't express, when they're hurt by something, or men shouldn't express when they feel, joyful about something or sad about something, or when there's legit pain going on in their body.
Right.
So a lot of times, all of these things that occur to everybody and are natural and normal are suppressed and come out in the weirdest ways.
Right.
Okay, so first, because the way you stated that, I think
Mhm.
some people could disagree.
Okay.
So it's more because I think because some people would say, well, when did
we say you couldn't
someone
talk?
say you can't
Right.
be excited about things?
Sure.
I think that it's a little more nuanced. So definitely the aspects of like showing emotions or certain emotions, right? Being vulnerable. But it's more about that. It's more about the vulnerability.
Correct.
It's more about men are not supposed to be vulnerable, and then you get a training. So it's because it's not that people in general will tell you like you shouldn't be excited about things, but it's more nuanced
When
and set
you
up in
show
a way.
yourself,
But hold on, it's more nuanced and set up in a way, and you're kind of unspoken way, so that the way you feel when you're excited about something, you don't feel comfortable expressing it because
Right.
you feel that vulnerability,
exactly.
and you realize like 'cause you could be made fun of or
Yeah.
whatever, and because we're set up in a way where you're not supposed to be vulnerable, or you're not comfortable because there isn't that. Because just I mean, the way we are, as men, we do tease each other, and we have that, and that's an important, I think, aspect of our culture. Because men, on the other hand, do need a certain level of toughness.
Sure,
Like, you
absolutely.
really can't just be breaking down over the simplest
Absolutely.
statement.
And
But
that
there's
kinda,
also like I was talking to somebody earlier this week about this very topic, actually, and it's very interesting because, um, like, let's say a guy's going through something, and they get with their group of guy friends, and they say, "Hey, this really sucks." And not every group is like this, but hey, I'm going through this. It really sucks. I'm not sure how to deal with it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, just tough it out. You'll deal with it. Or why are you bringing that up? We don't talk about stuff like
But see,
that.
that's the problem, because there are groups that aren't like that.
Exactly.
There are a lot of
Like-
groups like that.
Like I said, there
And
are
the
a lot
only
of groups
issue
that are
is
like
that the groups don't know how to deal with that properly.
exactly. It's a
But-
level of emotional maturity.
Because I think
lacking.
that's more
There's a level of emotional maturity that's lacking, because dealing with those things and actually understanding how they affect your body and stuff is necessary.
there's a lot that can be said about that. But usually let our guest talk.
Okay, well,
For sake, man.
okay.
Oh no, I'm glad that I'm glad to be a guest here. I tell you what, that coffee's great, by the way. Yeah. Oh,
This
yeah, I didn't get
transparent
any,
coffee.
but yeah, no. I mean, the thing is, you know, when you're brought to that level, right? A lot of it is emotional insecurities that people have,
Mhm.
and that's everybody's got something that they're insecure about.
Sure.
Not everybody's just like nothing in my life I'm insecure about,
Right.
right? But when you're brought to that level of just like complete brokenness,
Mhm.
you lose a lot of those insecurities. And
Sure.
it's like things that were important,
Or
like
no-
in high school
yeah,
and
that's
things
very
like
true.
that. It's like all of a sudden they're nothing, they're meaningless.
Mhm.
It's more about survival at this point, and none of those things matter. So in that way, it does toughen you up, but again, how do you address that in a society? Do you throw everybody into
Right,
this
into a
situation where
horrible
they're totally
situation.
broken? No, I mean, and we all learn a little bit different. Not everybody has to learn that way.
Mhm.
I kind of felt like I did. I needed that in order to bring me to that. But it's such a huge advantage in life because there's so many times that people play like psychological games with you. They
Right.
try to find out what bothers you, and I'm
So
going to
they can
pick
use
at
it
it.
against you, yeah.
Right.
And people
Have
build
fun with that,
walls as a
because
Right.
result.
I don't care, right?
Right. There are
You
definitely
know?
those people out there, but see, this is I mean, it's very. I think you have to be kind of very openly considering because, like, for someone to say that there are those people out there, but that's not the majority. For someone to be like,
Yeah.
because I'm not saying you said this, but I'm saying some
Mhm.
people would make a mistake and say, well, think about some, men. A lot of times we look for the thing, but that's not.
But it's
It's not the same.
it's not the majority that gets noticed. It's
It's a
often
vocal
the
minority.
minority,
Yeah.
the vocal
The vocal
minority,
minority.
right?
True.
So,
But I think that's the issue. The majority should learn to speak up, and that's the biggest issue.
right.
We learn to kind of just be quiet and watch things.
Mhm.
But I think that's a very very great point. I almost said it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm learning other words.
Right.
That's a very intriguing point.
Yeah.
No, it's a very great. It's something we definitely don't want to. Like you said, you don't want to have to recreate that because at the same time, it is true. It is true in the end, and that's why some people are able to get a lot of people are able to get that perspective with the, and it's a very superior perspective to be able to kind of just go, well, none of this matters.
Yeah.
None of this matters because I've been here, I've been there.
Yeah.
But not everyone has that ability.
Mhm.
And it is true because there is that certain basis of our culture, but it's not recognized anymore because that is truly the basis. But we've become so separated from having to survive
Mhm.
that in this new world that all these things become a conversation. We could talk about what so and so said, but in the world of just survival, it's like, okay, because so he called me stupid. I don't really care.
Yeah.
As long as he's
Yeah.
not over here trying to kill me,
Yes.
or interfering with me surviving and getting something to eat and finding somewhere to stay, then none of that actually does matter.
Right.
But we're in a time, now that you're in this world, which you are in this world now,
Right.
you're no longer on the streets. You're having to deal with these things, and I think that because I think it would be a minimalist for us to take it that way and go, okay, well, all of those men need to understand that they could just be dead tomorrow, so they just need to get over their their
Yeah.
problems, right?
No, it's not.
But the
No.
issue, because now here we are. It is a legitimate issue. It is a legitimate thing. It is a legitimate concern when you're in a certain position. When you're not in that position of fearing for your life, you're not concerned about those other aspects of your mental health.
Mhm.
But I think that which was my point to you, which is that, and I think it's more of an issue of it's kind of being changed. I think if you look at the culture now, it is actually much more common for your friends to have your
I
back
agree.
and to be
I
able to.
agree.
But it was historically an issue, and I think that's because the warped ideas of what a man is, or what a man is supposed to be.
Right.
And that comes from I think that comes from the time when it was like, yeah, the man's got to be tough and
Right. Tough.
don't apologize. It's a sign of weakness and all these things.
Yeah.
But it's true
tough
that
being interpreted as being brutal.
right, being
Right.
brutal, but not even just brutal. It just means not being emotional.
Right.
And I understand. You would understand that it is definitely is important because you don't want men who don't have control of their emotions.
Exactly. Don't know how to manage
Because
them.
then you have
Yeah.
war and all these things. Because it's like if on one hand, men, you don't want people to driving themselves into these places of suicide or all these things because they can't properly deal with their emotions and not properly in touch with them and damaging their children when they're trying to raise them. But at the same time, you don't want emotional men because then you have men that are just like punching people for no reason because
Yeah.
of the stupidest comment or whatever. You have all this,
Right.
because men are it's kind of a fine line you're walking where you really need to be able to control your emotions, specifically with the intense emotions,
Mhm.
because of the physicality, which I think is inherent about men, is inherent because of throughout all of history, we've had violence. All of history, we're in that survival period. And so we kind of have a lot of that there. It's kind of very unspoken, but it's kind of there. We still have those roots, even though now we're moving
Yeah.
away from it.
Yeah.
But we all have that roots in the survival, which is that there was the time in our history, not too long ago, when it was like, okay, well, I have to hold on to what I have, and I have to be prepared to defend it from someone else.
Yeah.
Because someone else will try to take it. Now, is that, what I'm saying, we could sit here and talk about all day about how right that and wrong that is, but that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah. And what it would take to actually fix a problem like that, you know, we can all do little things within our own little microcosms or whatever, however you want to explain that, but for an entire society to be able to be fixed of that type of issue would require a lot of work. It would require a lot of teamwork, consensus, and it's just, you know, there's that is not a priority right now.
Right.
It's not a priority. So, and you see the result of that, and that things, tend to get a little bit worse out there.
Right.
I remember, what is it, 20 years ago, the Columbine shooting, something close
It's
to
gotta be
that.
over. It's gotta be over. It's over 20 by now.
Possibly longer, but I mean, remember when that took place? That was such a big deal, and I mean, it still is. Obviously, it is a big deal, but I don't even know how many school shootings have taken place
A lot.
since then. And it's like that's it's like each year, it's like somebody's gonna try to outdo the last one.
Right.
And so it is signs that things are not getting better.
Right.
Well, how do we address that as a society? That's an important question, I think. But
But
it's not one that I hear people talking
I
about.
think that's why this is the conversation that should be had, which what years were brought up, which is because men kind of lead the society. We have for the longest time. Some people can have feminism and all these things and discuss about whether we should or not. But it really is realistically, men have been leading the society for the longest time. And realistically, and this is not to denigrate the importance of women or the importance of mothers, or to kind of like pretend that they're not massively important. But for certain lessons are taught through the father.
Yeah.
It's just the father is one of the most important jobs. I'm not gonna say it's the hardest job, because there are some hard jobs out there, like ice fishing in the Bering Strait. But some people say mother has the important job, and mother is very important. Both are very important. That's the point. You really need both parents.
Exactly.
But it's important because I think that a lot of those issues do come from the fathers, because when the fathers aren't, if you could get them to fix their mental health, they would be able to teach proper mental health to their children. They'd be able to understand how to deal with their children's mental health, and you begin raising generations that aren't. You begin to fix this. Right. Now, what mental, and obviously you want that tied in with things like morality, but those do tie in together.
Yeah. They all
can't
have
have
an
one without the
effect.
other.
You can't have one without the other.
Right.
Because you can fix your mental health by doing immoral things. And they're like, okay, well, I think my mental health would be okay if I just get rid of you.
Yeah,
and then you're out of the picture and my mental health is fine.
Yes.
And that would not be the right thing.
Right.
But I think that's what's very massively important. I think if you just look at the examples, it's almost every person I've talked to who has, not all of them. There's always exceptions that prove the rule, but the majority of the people I've talked to, specifically people who have been in communities, we talked about it with Todd Matthews, we talked about it with Dan and I, we talked about it with Danny Hogan's, and other people who aren't on the show yet, but people who are been involved in crime, specifically in the Black community, and been involved in crime or been in the areas where there is things of that nature. The biggest factor is the fathers not having a father.
Yeah, they're all gone.
That's right. See, that's what and Larry mentioned. They tested it with studies they did with elephants, where it actually causes like violent tendencies in the children. And I think Denzel Washington was one who said something about that him and all of his people, the children, the guys he grew up with, they're all in prison, and he's not. The difference is he had his father.
Right.
Yeah.
So you see the importance of father.
It's an interesting concept, because I've never really associated it with that, but I did recognize it. As I remember when I lost my dad at a young age. When I lost my dad, all of the misunderstood emotions and stuff that, and the time that I tried to take and comprehend all that, which I couldn't very well at that age, was expressed in rage.
Yeah.
I was breaking windows, breaking things, punching holes in walls, literally biting people. I mean, it was just outbursts of unexplained rage.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even tell you, well, why was I mad? Why did I bite kid? Why did I punch a hole? I didn't even know. It was just rage and violence.
Yeah.
So, but that makes a lot of sense.
That's a massively difficult and powerful set of emotions to expect a very young child to deal with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't, you can't really, what can you do? You can't eliminate that situation.
Right.
But that's where you need other figures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I was in a real similar situation. I think I was like 5 years old when my dad left. So you know, you don't realize it until later that you were actually looking for a void. Like I didn't think at that age that I was looking for somebody to kind of fill
Fill
those
that gap, yeah.
shoes. You know,
That's
it
very
wasn't consciously on my mind, but you know, growing up, getting into gangs and things like that, that was stuff that I did because I was searching for that. Okay, what, you know, what is it that I'm supposed to do? How is a man supposed to be? I was never taught
Right.
because
Right.
I didn't learn it, right? So,
Because you're supposed to have that figure there.
Exactly.
right.
There's all these. It's like there's all these lessons you learn, whether they're verbally or whether they're just visually. Nonverbal cues
Mm,
you pick up. We are very community driven.
yeah.
I don't know. There's another word for it. I can't think.
Creatures.
Creatures. There's another word for that. But we are very community driven creatures, and we are very we learn through. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're supposed to. Now, obviously, certain people get learning disabilities, but you really do. You
Yeah.
see
You
it.
learn
If
through
you see
interacting with
children,
others.
you see young people, and you see. I was watching a because there's some people that don't. I was watching this clip, this thing from with the FBI body language expert,
Uh-huh.
and he was talking about this is just really short. He was talking about whatever. Somebody asked him a question about how do you tell somebody you don't want to be in conversation through your body language, and he was like, well, the funny thing is, he goes, well, generally, he goes, I'll just point my foot toward an exit, and most people will pick up on that because it's really true.
Yeah.
Generally, a lot of us, but this is one thing. A lot of us can pick up these nonverbal cues because that's the way we're made. We're made to see all
Oftentimes
these things. But he goes, the issue is there's a lot of people who won't get it. And no matter what you do, and he goes, eventually you just got to grab him by the arm and be like, listen, buddy, I'd love to talk to you, but I got to go.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who just cannot pick up on that. But in general, we do pick up all these nonverbal things and we learn these things at a very young age. We pick up the emotions, we pick up all the body language, we learn how to read that because that's how we are as creatures. We're very community driven people. And there's a lot of things that, not just verbal, but nonverbal things that a child learns from his father.
Yeah.
If he's there. But if he's not there, you know what I'm saying? It is a whole.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said that because a lot of people, there's also a lot of people who have not come to understand that they are looking for, they were. A lot of people would say, no,
Maybe
I just,
Yeah, well,
was
they
doing this.
can't come to terms with reality, and I can say that because I was I heard people saying that, as I was growing up, like, well, you're searching for like a father. No, I'm not. What's wrong with you? But it took a little bit of maturity and to honestly, examine it and go back and realize, well, I was looking for some kind of guidance as to what a man should be, and obviously, I drifted towards violent things because that, as we were talking about before, it was kind of, this is what I
Society's
thought,
default. Yeah.
a man should be. A man's got to be tough, so I played football, I was wrestling, I was boxing. And then eventually I got to a point where I joined a gang, and then it was like, oh, okay, now I'm really a man because I'm in a gang and we can beat people up. That's what being a man's about, and it really has nothing to do with that. It's just a bunch of other lost, misdirected people.
And that's a perfect example to kind of go back to what you're saying, which is without that, what you really is you pick up very surface, and it's often miss what's the word? I want to say not miscommunicate, but you misunderstood. I guess I feel like that doesn't fit, but misunderstand what a man is. You pick up these very surface, like, okay, a man is strong.
Mm-hmm.
How is one strong? He exerts his will over others, and it's all these these very simple surface level things, and it's a same thing we're talking about mental health, where that's where that kind of came from. I think is that a lot of people not having an actual, even if the father's there, if he doesn't know, not actually having an example of what a man is supposed to be. They developed these ideas,
and most people don't take the time to understand what goes on in their own brain.
Well, there's no, especially at that time, there was no resources, So like now, a person can research something real easily, and that is a huge advantage that I would say our children, young people, whoever today, if you have a problem, somebody's got a video about it, that I used to have to walk to the library and look at the Dewey Decimal System and go try to find a book, and or just try to find somebody who knew a little bit more, but it's a lot easier resource wise, but for some reason it seems like people don't take advantage of that. We get
Right.
so caught up in everything else, the entertainment, the blah blah blah. At the end of the day, you think about it, you work all day and then you come home and you want to be entertained for the evening
Right.
rather than like do anything to really help your problems. It's a vicious cycle,
It really is. Let's take a break. So it's my wife's birthday next week, Con. So I was trying to figure out what gift to get her. She keeps leaving me hints around the house. She keeps leaving jewelry magazines laying around. So I'm gonna get her a magazine rack. All right, we're back. I think on the topic of mental health, men's mental health, I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say misplaced, I don't want to say aggression, but misplaced aggression towards women.
Yes. For sure.
With that, and I think it's because people feel like, oh, well, some people are like, oh, women expect this and that and this and that, and it's, part of this comes from women expecting this from men.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, on one side, realistically, that's really comes from us, and not really us, but people before us. It's really our fault then, for giving them a not very solid example of what a man is supposed to be.
Sure.
And so their ideas of what men are supposed to be came from weak men, basically,
Right.
in general. And so then, it's kind of this sort of circle, and then the aggression gets
Define a
misplaced.
weak man, because some people might, literally because of what you're talking about, have a misunderstood.
Well, I
idea of
think
what a weak man is.
it's very broad spectrum.
Mhm.
In general, I mean, I think a weak man is one, very emotional,
Mhm.
not in control of his emotions. I think not able to fulfill his role properly as a teacher, as a guide. The kind of man who would leave his family specifically.
Sure.
You have your basic weak man is like the kind of man who would hit a woman but as realistically, that doesn't come from delight in striking women, but generally a lack of control of their emotions.
If I could define a weak man in a short sentence, it would be a man who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it.
I like that.
That's a great point.
It's just that simple sometimes. It's like, it's not like any of us have this perfect set of cards that we start out with,
Sure.
but that is true courage. It's just not being fearless. Being fearless is stupid.
Right.
If you don't have any fear, you're dumb. That you're not going to last very long. But how you control that fear, and that's the more
Fear
important thing.
being an emotion.
Fear,
And so
being
kind of
an
exactly
emotion, right.
what I was saying there, which is the emotionality, which is because people misunderstand what it means to be emotional.
Right.
People think emotional means like, oh, I'm crying.
Well,
all
they
these
automatically
movies and-
assume
Right.
sadness.
You can
and
be
things like that.
emotional and be an incredibly intellectual person.
Yes.
You can be emotional and be a very quiet person. People think emotional people are these loud, openly. You can be very quiet and be extremely emotional and be in like, I know people who are super quiet and they're emotional people sitting there going like, I bet y'all are thinking this about me and probably saying this about me.
The truth is,
But then when they're
everybody
around you,
is
they're just like very
emotional.
quiet, and people mistake that outward quietness as being strong. So there's people who will mistake someone who's very quiet and go, he's not very emotional. He's a very stoic sort of person.
The truth is, everybody's emotional. People just
Right.
manage their emotions.
See,
differently.
people mistake being emotional with the expression of being emotional. Emotional people don't always have to express it. Everyone is emotional, but I mean, when we speak of, and I guess the better would be given to their emotions
Yeah.
more than the other things, and that's exactly what that is there, because it generally comes from emotions.
Right.
Where a man knows the right thing to do, but he's afraid,
Yeah.
and so he gives into his emotions rather than his logical. Because
And
we're
that's
supposed
what
to
I
be
wanted to get at.
we're supposed to be logical creatures. We're
Mhm.
supposed to be logical reasoning creatures, but not even sometimes it isn't. I mean, it's generally I guess it really fit in logic, but sometimes there's very often situations where it's just this was what needs to be done, right? And there is no like it could be simple, very basic logic. This is just what needs to be done, and it's going to be difficult.
Mhm.
And a person, a weak man will generally run away from that. And that's a similar, kind of example I said before you said that, which is men who would leave, their children.
Right.
Because that's a difficult job. And it's a difficult thing ahead of you. And it is what you have to do. It is your responsibility. It's what needs to be done.
Well, and it's also ties in with the what you're talking about with the violence in women, right? So women and men tend to be very different,
Mhm.
and sometimes it can be challenging for a man to try to deal with women's issues and the way that their perspective, the way they see things, and instead of being empathetic or trying to, they end up getting frustrated because it's just like, "Hey, that's too much work. You
Right.
just shut up and do that," and it becomes a violent type situation because they're
There's also ones that
frustrated
are
because
very
they don't.
insecurity.
It is an insecurity, because they don't know how to deal with things.
Right.
But and there's a wide variety of reasons for the violence,
Right. But that's generally what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Not knowing how to deal with these things. And I think that that's why it's so important, because if you don't train men to deal with their emotions, you inherently raise weak men.
Right.
Right? Because
Exactly.
like you said, everyone's emotional. Everyone's emotional. Some people experience emotions more than others, but realistically, women, I think in general, experience emotions much stronger than we do. Much stronger than we do.
Mhm.
The situation is very often, they don't have the physicality.
Yeah.
They're not the overpowering.
Yeah.
But even then, and there are situations. There are also a lot of, like, in general, majority of women, it's less likely for the women to be striking the men than the men to be striking the women.
Yes. And of course, there's always going to be exceptions. And generality, might be just a little bit more than the other. But one of the interesting things about it that I've noticed in actually dealing with children is that women are way better.
Yeah.
like children are great. They're awesome. We love them, right? For a while. And then it's like, you shut up, just stop that. You start kind of, getting those emotions where, yeah, a woman goes through that too, but they can deal with it a lot better than we can. It's like
Right.
they're inherently programmed to deal with that better. And I don't want to try to sound like chauvinistic or whatever, saying something like that.
You're
But
simply saying,
that is just a key observation that I've made throughout my
right, that's
entire
not
life.
chauvinistic to say.
Yeah.
Men and women have different jobs and different responsibilities. We are different.
Yeah.
And some things we're better at and some things they're better at.
Yeah.
That's clearly something they're better at. I think
Yeah.
they're generally better teachers.
Yeah.
Specifically for young children.
Yeah.
They're generally a lot more colorful.
Yeah.
They have that much more patience.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, they enjoy doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
And they have that creativity. And versus we can be, and in some ways that kind of goes to the programming where we are programmed to be less creative.
Mhm.
And it goes back to what we were talking about, where it goes to vulnerability. Because when you create something,
You're
now you
showing
have to be
people
ready. Yeah, you're showing people.
a side
We've
of you.
talked about this. You're a part of yourself. And now it's open for anyone to be like, oh, that sucks. You're horrible. You are stupid.
or having
Yeah.
Why would you think that was great? You have no taste. And now you have
Right.
to deal with that.
Yes.
So
We were talking about like that self-confidence earlier, and that's something that a mother tends to put within the child, because the mother's always thinking, "Oh, look at me, you're
Right.
such a great,"
right.
Yeah.
Everything in life is about balance.
Yes.
Mhm.
Because if the child has to have that,
Yeah.
he needs to have that, but also he's got to go into the world and deal with someone
Right.
telling him no. Because if you bring a child in, into the world who doesn't get the other side, where he goes and gets culture and people telling him no, you suck.
Yeah. Right.
Then you have children thinking, these people thinking they can go on what American Idol and they're
Right.
tone deaf and being like, well, my mom said I was a great singer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You're not a great singer.
Yes.
You're not. But everyone's supposed to, and that kind of goes into ideas of fairness and equality and equity, and being that, everyone's supposed to get the same things. And it's like, no, there is a point of earning things.
Yeah.
In our culture, in the world in general. There is a meritocracy, even though we want to, we want to pretend, and that comes from, I think, giving the children, without giving them the other side, without getting that balance. You raise these children expecting like everyone should just kind of tell you did a great job, even if you didn't. And you
Yeah.
really should at an early
There's
age.
an
Like, it's not
inherent
great.
danger
It's
to
not
that.
great. There's inherent, but see, that's why I'm talking about balance, because there's inherent danger for you to tell your son, like, son, that was a horrible picture of a
I'm sure that
whatever.
too, yeah.
You are a horrible artist.
Yeah.
Stick to your day job of crying, whatever. There's a danger in that.
Yes. Yeah.
At the same time, there's also a danger in the other side of when he gets to be an adult, and you're like, yeah, no, you absolutely can build a house.
Yeah.
And then someone dies because the house fell in.
Right.
Because he doesn't know how to build a house.
Builder ever, little guy. Yeah.
I love how you didn't use any nails or screws.
Yes. Yeah. No. There really has to be a point where we can be honest with each other. You
Yeah.
know, and
Be honest with each other.
that's kind of that. Like I was saying earlier, that seems to be what's lacking a lot, and that whole polarization. It's like everybody seems to not be able to do that.
Right.
You know.
See, that's the issue. We've gotten to a point where honesty is radical.
Right.
It really is.
Right.
Honesty is radical. If you sit down, because things we're saying and being frank, because the things we're saying, they're just honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who'd be offended by them.
Yeah.
And there are people who would say that it would consider that radical.
Yeah.
To say, listen, this is just how it is. And these are things that it really is how it is. It really was accepted up until 20 minutes ago. And
Right.
you see, because we live in the world where now it's like so many things are taken offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there are people, I know you've dealt with them, who can't even take simple criticism.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
really have to be able to.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way you grow.
Yeah.
You really have to be able to. But if we don't teach this to people in a very early age, you really have to be able to take criticism because that's the only way to grow. And a lot of times, there's people who take that personal.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody is saying, and I get how it can be hard when you're talking about creativity. But even then, even if it's not creativity, nobody's denigrating who you are as a person or
Right.
saying you're not important.
Yeah, I've worked and dealt with people who have just take everything as a personal attack. It's like, hey, how you doing today? I see you're wearing a blue shirt.
From blue.
Yeah, right. Well, you just, everything, no matter what it is, like the smallest thing. But and a person like that can be like somewhat annoying to have to deal with. But for me, I like. And it kind of goes back to what we were originally talking about, working with your hands. I like problems, so I like fixing problems.
Right.
So when somebody has like a particular problem like that, I always look for ways. Well, okay, how can I fix this? 'Cause this is annoying. I want to fix it. And I'll try to deal with that individual and see what works and what doesn't work. I think that whatever that is lacking in society. That people don't care about other people's problems.
Right.
It's just me, and you know, uh, there's ways to find an enjoyment in doing things for other people, and that's like that seems odd. It goes against like what society would really teach you growing up, that your job is to make money, to buy your castle, to stay in your little place, and you don't have to buy a fence around that and have a fence in that gated community where nobody can come near your house. This is this is like the pinnacle of success in the city.
It is an interesting
So-
paradigm because you have to prioritize yourself in order to take care of yourself. But
Yes.
then why are you taking care of yourself?
Right.
So that you can help other people, so that you
Right.
can be a benefit to society around you. Otherwise, you're just, like you said, in your own little castle, and the castle walls are high, and you're lonely, and you have
Yeah.
nobody. It's a horrible situation.
Yeah. So, when I was living on the streets, and I say the streets, right? I moved around a lot. Like, didn't just stay on the streets of one city. Traveled all across the United States and into Mexico and Canada. But when I moved to Mexico, I ran out of money like in a week. And I was down about 1,400 miles south of the border.
Oh, wow.
And beautiful place. Really liked it. The weather was perfect. Ocean right there and all that. But I would see these tourists come from other countries, and I would watch where they were staying. They had these big skyrise hotels,
Mhm.
right? And like, you just left that.
Right.
You just left this downtown Los Angeles to come to this place, all this distance, so you could stay in a place that looks just like what
Los
you
Angeles.
left.
Yeah.
And deal with people who are not indicative to the environment that to me, it was like a phony, like, what do you actually do? You're just coming here to look at the water?
Right.
Look, get a picture. So when I was there, I would live with those people, and I learned a lot in living that lifestyle about breaking barriers, right? So obviously, I moved there. I didn't speak any Spanish. I didn't know a lick of Spanish. I took 4 years of German in high school and moved to Mexico. So, I'm my trying to learn their language, learn their culture. You'd be surprised at how much they appreciated that,
Yeah,
and how like,
for
hey,
sure.
wait a second, this one's odd,
You
and
actually care. Yeah.
I'll never forget how hospitable people were in Mexico. Like it was just like a different environment altogether, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Of course, it had its downfalls too,
Sure.
you know. But that's just part of it right there. Is learning to break barriers with people. Things like so from there. One of the places I lived in, in New Orleans, I lived in a neighborhood where I was the only one my color.
Mhm.
Nobody looked like me, and it was interesting because okay, I'm in this environment. How do I survive it?
Right.
There's that problem solving thing, cuckoo thing in my head that really enjoyed that aspect of it. So you were talking about noticing things out of peripheral vision. I can tell you from experience, when I walk down any street of that city, if there was somebody walking across the street, I could tell by the way they were walking whether or not they were a problem or not.
Mhm.
If I heard footsteps behind me, I knew the different sounds of footsteps. You were just aware of all of that because we had the number one murder rate in the United States that year, and people were dying. One of the people I met down in the French Quarter, who was coming to see me, they shot him in the head on the way there. Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, their life meant nothing there.
Mhm.
Like it was just a game. I got another one. Another person walking down the road. So, you know, how do you, who look totally different, how do you even attempt to blend into that? And the truth is, you can't. You can't blend in. And I've never been that type to where I try to act like everybody else around me.
Mhm.
But I gained respect from the people that lived there somehow. And I think, all I can look back and kind of attribute to it is that there was like a genuineness, to the way I would approach things. I didn't try to pretend to be like you.
Right.
I'm just me and you're you, and I'm okay with that. And when a person sees that just like kind of catches them off guard, like, oh, that's different. And I got to know a lot of people there, and it all worked out.
That's awesome.
Okay, but how did you develop that? Because that requires a massive comfortability with being in your own skin and being who you are,
Yes.
which is missing a lot in society. Definitely, with people our age because of social media. But overall, even in general with people, it's missing a lot. That comfortability of just being who you are and being yourself. And everybody feels, conformity is a very powerful, powerful force.
Yeah.
And no one's impervious to it.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who are much more susceptible. Susceptible. I see I said that right. But I don't want to say susceptible, like our great friend would say. There's much more. There are people who are susceptible to it, and there's a lot of people. Majority of people are more susceptible to it than you would be. A lot of people, in general, will be trying to change themselves and aren't comfortable being themselves and being able to be that and being like, no, I need to be this way.
Yeah.
How did you develop that comfortability of just being like, okay, I'm not going to try to be something that I'm not.
I think I can kind of trace it back. If I could trace it back to one moment in my childhood when, little kids, like you want to be a fireman, you want to be a this or that. And I remember talking to my mom about it, and she said that I don't care what it is that you grow up to be, just as long as you grow up to be a decent person. And for some reason, that stuck with me. And I've always thought that if I could do that, then I was a success. It didn't matter. Nothing else mattered.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So it's like I didn't grow up with aspirations to acquire things. I wanted to become a person,
Mhm.
and it wasn't easy, and I'm still not easy. I'm not the person that I want to be, but it's like I have the just being on that mindset gives me a little bit of like comfort, I guess.
But I think if you ever are the person that you want to be, you're probably in a bad place.
Right.
Really, because I think
the
the entirety of our purpose here, I don't want to say purpose, but of life is trying to become that better person. And if you ever reach a point where you're comfortable with who you are, and at that level of like, I'm just the best I can ever be, one, you're not gonna, well, what are you doing in here? What are you doing? You have nothing to acquire. And then two, most likely you're completely deluded.
Yes.
You're completely deluded, because there's a lot of those people who are just like, they won't say people, because often some people do, some people won't. But in general, most people won't be like, I'm just the best version of like everyone ever. I'm just awesome. Yeah. There's nothing to change about me. But they're not changing themselves.
Yeah.
And there's a subconscious mentality of like, well, like I'm pretty much better than you.
Yeah.
And it's not a conscious thought, but you can see when people carry themselves where they're just like, yeah, you need to kind of ingratiate yourself to me.
Yeah, and I want to say nearly 100% of the time when a person like that comes onto a job site, and I'm working with an individual like that, it's like I can tell right away, it's going to be one of those,
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm the best. You can't tell me anything. Blah, blah. They're dangerous. They're dangerous because it's like they don't accept any kind of warning.
Yeah.
And I could watch them and say, like you're about to. I know what I'm doing. But all right, do it.
Yeah, that's what occurs.
And then I'll wait for it to go wrong, and I'll like, see, right. Now that's what I was.
And those kind of people, wouldn't really survive very long in the area you're talking about.
Absolutely not.
Right.
No. There's you can't be the toughest guy, and that's something that I've also learned. Like I said, when I was real young, I got into that violent lifestyle and all that, and I moved away from California in time for me to not get totally engulfed in it. But I remember seeing that there's an end result to the tough guy route.
Yeah.
And it's going to end up bad one way or another.
And it's almost never pretty.
It's not the Hollywood movie, it's not the guy who goes into the town and saves the girl and beats up all the bad guys. It's not how it ends. You get killed. People get killed. People get shot. People get stabbed.
Right, you've seen a lot of that where you come from?
Yeah. I mean, I remember sitting in a bar in New Orleans and they were carrying this guy in. And I don't know if he was shot or stabbed. He was punctured. He had blood all over him. And the bartender pulled out a gun and told him to get him out of there.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, at first I was shocked. I'm like, man, I think that guy needed medical attention. He's like, what do you think did that? He's like, you want it coming in here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Valid point. But I'm not sure it's the right call,
right,
but I understand.
It's a really sad state of affairs when you can't afford empathy.
Yeah.
When you can't afford to be empathetic.
Right.
That's a place you do not ever want to. That's not an environment you never want to be in, because, there is no realistically there's no way but down.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way up. That's for sure.
Right.
Okay. Yes. Hold on. Let's rephrase that. There's no way. There is no lower level.
Right.
Other than death. That's what I meant to say there, but I totally twisted my words. Because you're not, when you're in a place where it's just like, I have to see somebody dying and have to be like, let me not get involved because I can die. That sort of environment, what kind of growth can you possibly do there? Right. Other than getting out of that environment. So there is also no way. There is also no way out, because you can't really become a better person.
You can't. That situation is never going to create success.
Right.
You have to completely.
And it's only going to destroy you as a person.
Yeah. And
because empathy is a very important character trait and ability, specifically long term, and what we're trying to do in the worldwide.
Yeah.
Not in that world, not in that city, not in that place. It's not important. It's one of the least important, because that's the only way you survive.
Yeah.
Caring about, and that sort of position, caring about other people, gets you killed.
Yeah. I'd say it can, you're always going to have that risk. I don't care where
Right.
you're at. That risk exists in life,
Yeah.
but at some point, being who you are will override that fear to where you make a stand in a situation where it doesn't make sense to make a stand,
Mhm.
but it's because you believe in something stronger than just preserving my life, you know.
And that's a really
And
great place to be.
yeah, that's you look at people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and a lot of the great leaders that have come up through history. They were put in difficult positions. They led marches where they were beaten.
Right.
At the end of it, both of them were killed. That type of thing. But what they both came to that realization that what they were fighting for was more important than the preservation of their life, and that's to me more of an ultimate goal. When we get there, we're doing all right.
Wow. Yeah.
I want to ask you something before we close,
Mm-hmm.
because it's something I've always admired about you and something that most people that know you would admire about you. And you're always smiling. You always have a positive attitude. It's very
Were you
rare.
always that way?
It's very rare to see you, with a frown on your face or just in a pissed off mood.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to, and how does one get there?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess you could probably attribute it to a lot of things. Partially, I would say my upbringing. My mother was a lot like that. She was always, a joyful person like that. But I don't know that I consciously did that. Like ever since I was a child, I was like that, and it was strange. Like I said, like my life took a violent turn for a little while when I was younger. I still had that. You know how bad that is for like a tough guy to be wearing a smile? It actually worked to my advantage, and
Don't mess with that guy. He's crazy.
Well, I mean,
yeah, and people will not see it coming.
Right.
So like
that's on some interesting stories. You feel free to share.
yeah, I always knew I'd get the first.
Right.
If it came to
You
a
seem
fist fight,
jovial.
I would get the first punch because of that.
Mhm.
I would walk up just smiling, just like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then
Right. 'Cause you're just a
that.
jovial person.
But
Wow, that's interesting. I did.
yeah.
I assumed this was just the ending of your life. Like
Yeah,
the last part of your life so far. You became that kind of person.
No. So that is something that I've actually carried with me, but it's gotten more so. I would say in my later years.
Right. So talking about this violent person, right? You became a violent person. How difficult is it to change that? Was that I mean, obviously it's a long term, but how difficult, and how did you change that outside of, just your circumstances?
So with my particular situation, I realized that what I wanted to become was different from what I wanted to become. So I had this thing in my mind of being this tough guy, like and there was like some kind of like glorious thing attached to that because you blame it on Hollywood, blame it on whatever. That's just what I thought it was going to be. But what I realized once you get into that world, people aren't cool.
Right.
People aren't pleasant. People are not fun to hang around with.
And they're not there for each other.
No. And as much as they say they're there for each other,
Yeah.
it's like being in a gang, that's what it's all about. You're my brother in the gang. Well, I got your back. Blah, 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 blah. No, you don't.
Right.
Those people will turn on you in a heartbeat. Most gang violence is against members of the same gang, and most violence in general is against people who look just like you,
Mhm.
So people talk about, all these other things, and they do exist, but we're comfortable hating things that we're similar and we're familiar with. So when I realized that, I turned away from it. I was like, it was one particular night that there was a big fight that took place, and we were about to leave, and I was standing. I was the only one in the gang that I was in. I was the only one who lived there lived in the city that I did. They were all from somewhere else. So, but they were down in my city. So we were getting ready to leave, and a friend that I knew, yelled out, "Hey, your headlights are off." They got out of and they beat him up, and I tried to climb on top of him to protect him, and I was getting kicked and everything like that. They ended up breaking his collarbone, his jaw, his nose, all that stuff, and for no reason, just hey, your headlights are off,
Wow.
and it was that night I was like, I thought about it, and I was like, I don't want to do this,
Yeah.
This is not what I wanted it to. This is different from the picture I had in my mind. And it got a little scary at times, because it's not like the type of thing, well, I'd like to turn in my 2 weeks notice and
Right, exactly.
Right.
I'm gonna be done. No, it's not like that at all. And that, there was several nights where, it was, I spent a lot of time worrying about all that. Um, but like I said, I ended up getting out of California, and starting my life somewhere else.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you said. A weak man
Yeah.
knows what needs to be done and doesn't do it. What's right. And obviously, you're not a weak man. But I think, I was thinking like it's interesting kind of tying it back because that sort of pack mentality, which is similar to dogs, which is really just a lack of structure there. Because when dogs are trained properly, you know what I'm saying? You don't have that situation when dogs are just allowed to run loose. They end up developing a pack. Like even just domesticated dogs, if they're just thrown out into the street, you get a group of dogs, they develop a pack, and it's incredibly vicious like that. That viciousness takes over very quickly. And without that, there's not that sort of structure there. You have to put them down. You have to end up taking them out because you can't. Well, majority, and you have things like alphas and all these things, but it's because it's interesting how quickly that sort of thing takes over, and it's that lack of structure, which is I think would probably be the similar to the issue there. Which I think is the issue overall in society is a lack of structure, specifically morally, specifically people being educated, not just morally. Because I think the thing about morals is when we speak about moral, we're not just talking about the principle itself
Right.
of what is right and wrong, but how to enact that and how to do that. Because people
That's
hear
important.
people hear morally, they hear and they go, well, everybody knows. People know you shouldn't steal. People know what's right and wrong or whatever. But it's not just what's right and wrong, but it's how to apply that in your life, how to tell what's right and wrong, like how you can, because it becomes nuanced. It's not always simple as, hey, let's go steal from this innocent person.
Right.
It becomes nuanced and it becomes, and it becomes subtle, but all, how to apply that into your life, all the different principles that are around that. Because the idea is like, I was thinking earlier when we were talking, I was like, because one of the things they say, we're talking about people being self-centered or selfish, and one of the things they say, like the real, because I was wondering, what do you do? How do you change that so people learn to care about? Because people don't care about other people situations. How do you change that? I know one of the statements is made is like the best way to convince somebody to help somebody else is to show them how it helps them.
Yeah.
Because we're very self-centered.
Yeah. Well, that is true.
So it's the most successful way right now.
But it's also, kind of like what we were talking about earlier. You have to be willing to put yourself in a position of getting hurt, and a lot of people are not willing to do
Right.
that. And so one of the things that when I was on the streets of New Orleans, there was this guy. He obviously mentally ill, but kind of a dangerous fella. He stabbed a few guys that lived on the streets there, and he'd get arrested. They let him back out. Well, he was cold one night. It was wintertime in New Orleans, and I was up in this like the Skid Row hotel type thing, but I could tell. I mean, it was cold, and he didn't have a jacket or anything, and I was like, I'm working at this restaurant. I was washing dishes at a restaurant in the French Quarter, so I went down there and I gave him my jacket. That guy broke down crying, and I've never seen him in an emotional state like that. The next day, we talked and everything, and he's like, "Why are you trying to change me? You can't change me." I said, "I'm not trying to change you. It's like you're cold. I know what it's like to be cold. I'm all right. I got other jackets. You didn't. And since then, I gained an ally there.
Right.
Physically, yeah, he could have killed me. That guy was bad news. But little things like that. So in order to do something like that, though, you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation.
Right.
When you enter into those worlds, there's no guarantee that somebody's going to see the light, so to speak, the proverbial, I get it now. No, I don't think he really got it, but he got something,
Right.
and it's,
And it strengthens your character.
right.
It strengthens yourself because
Right.
that act of pushing through that, because it would be so easy just to turn around and keep going, doing your
Yeah.
thing. No matter how bad you wanted to help somebody, there still is that sort of pushback of like common sense, some would say.
Yeah,
And go, it's definitely not smart. We're not endorsing anyone
Yes.
to go out
Yes.
and find the most dangerous people and give them jackets.
Yes.
That's not what we're suggesting to do.
Yeah.
Not saying that, it's about the idea of empathy, but
Right.
definitely you can also use your brain sometimes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting example because most people are not willing to go that far. Most people will, the farthest a lot of people will go is, I'll just donate some money to a charity.
Right.
Very few people are willing to go out and, because there's the people, you see them on social media or they have YouTube channels or whatever where they go and actually like help people. They go and invite them into their home and all these things. But there's very few people have the willing, because that puts you in a discomfort.
Yes.
Yes. And so to develop the care and concern and the empathy to the level of being willing to put yourself in discomfort to help somebody else who needs it is the true signification, I guess, sign of empathy.
Yeah.
And care for other people, because it's very easy to, just like it's very easy to do things when it's easy. It's very easy to stand up when everyone's standing up against something.
Yes.
It's very easy to go across the street and help like the normal sane guy.
Yeah.
Who's just, let me just pick you. It's but when you don't know what's going to occur.
Yeah.
When it's much more, when you have to go out there and put yourself in a position where it's like, okay, not even just dangerous, but just be like, I have to give you something that I could still use.
Yeah. Even if it's just an uncomfortable situation talking with your friend, right? So you have a close friend that said, he's got an obvious thing wrong with him. You don't want to be blunt and just like, hey, let me level with you. You got this thing wrong with you, whatever it is, people shy away. You could be scared of that, and I say scared, we don't want to be uncomfortable. It's much easier to be
But
agreeable.
those are the situations that actually bring change.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but exactly, those are the ones that really make a difference, and
Right. And yeah, that's how, and I guess that's the mark of being, it's a mark of being a strong man.
mm-hmm.
Because I think that it's sort of a responsibility of us because our responsibility is to change things and to be able to do the right thing despite how uncomfortable it is. And if you can't do that, well, I don't think you could really call yourself strong.
No, but you're not a failure.
There's still hope for you. I'm not saying there's not hope. But we're not saying
you're watching out there. There's still hope for you.
Yes, go get your jackets. Find the nearest homeless person.
And it's like y'all know that I love coffee and that you bring me onto your show and y'all got coffee cups and I don't. I'm not even gonna bring that up. Oh shoot, I already did.
I think that's a perfect note to close on. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and cut on that.
Yeah, that's great.
We'll cut all that part out so no one will know that.
Yes,
we'll digitally
enhance it.
We'll put one on here. We'll just copy. I'll just copy.
Thank you. That was a great cup of coffee.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming by, and I'm excited to have you back on soon enough.
Yeah. Hopefully.
That was a. Hopefully, that means it might be now. I don't know. It was that bad.
No, it was okay. You gotta accept that.
Listen, guys, we are doing great things here at the Lamplight Productions, and you can be a part of it for the low price of $0.00. Because all you gotta do is subscribe, ring the bell, ding dong. You can't go wrong, or don't. It's a free country. Do whatever you want. Though I don't know how you can live with yourself.